Other additions? Mark?
Well, I think Dick touched on the fiduciary issue. It's kind of interesting because right now, what is today, April 20th or 21st, they've got this finance reform bill coming out, the Dodd bill. And originally there was a fiduciary language in there saying that all brokers, all financial advisors must be subject to a fiduciary standard, which is the highest law of the land. Do unto others as work in their best interest. And then this fiduciary standard gets popped out a couple months later. And it's kind of interesting because I wonder who, I'm a little skeptical because the lobbyists on the Hill, but it's so critical. Here we have a reform package, and they're talking about creating a new consumer protection agency, but there is no language in the bill that's saying that you must treat your client like you would treat, yourself or your family. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's kind of, you talked about anger. It's why wouldn't you be skeptical?
Mm-hmm.
Because
fair enough.
I'm angry too.
And it's pretty sad that we have to write things like that down, isn't it?
Yeah. Even on the Goldman Sachs thing, my greatest concern is, and I'm not an advocate of Goldman Sachs, not. I saw the SEC bring that lawsuit against Goldman Sachs, and I had to scratch my head. And what a lot of people don't realize is just to bring the lawsuit, the 5 commissioners of the SEC, even to bring the lawsuit, were split 3-2. 2 said we shouldn't even bring the lawsuit. Here's my problem with it. It isn't whether that lawsuit is right or wrong, or the SEC is right or wrong, or Goldman Sachs is right or wrong. The problem is I hope it doesn't transfer responsibility. It doesn't all of a sudden get people to say, Wall Street is the greedy person. They caused the financial crisis. Well, I'm sorry. I beg your pardon. They probably caused a lot of it, but there's government in that mix too. I think there's enough blame to go around with everybody in this deal. I think there's greedy individuals that bought homes on mortgages they knew they couldn't afford. So I think there's plenty of blame to pass around to everybody, and I hope it doesn't transfer onto one firm and say, we got you, you scoundrels. That's my concern with this lawsuit.
Well, one of the bigger concerns I have is that coming through a crisis, there tends to be over legislation. It happened with the Enron episode. You had Sarbanes-Oxley, which crippled, Fortune 500 companies because they had 5,000 filings that they had to do. And what I am worried that they're going to over legislate this and not cure the problem, which is really making sure that banks and financial firms are not too big to fail. And so it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Yeah. We're definitely watching
the
closely.
Sarbanes-Oxley, that's a law that...
That's a law that was passed in 2002. In the heat of the moment, you had WorldCom and Enron, and so they wanted to make sure that didn't happen again. And so, what I'm worried about is they don't take, because at the end of the day, the financial world has to loan money to people, to businesses, to spur the economy. And if there's too much legislation, it worries me.
Yeah, but it never did any good anyway, because then 5 years later or so you have AIG, you have WAMU. How many names can we say? How many people went broke even with all the Sarbanes-Oxley stuff? So I'm not sure that you can ever legislate morality. Mm-hmm. You can't abandon or abolish greed. You'd like to, I guess, but from a practical standpoint, too much legislation probably is going to be a hindrance overall, and you're going to have so many unintended consequences that from any legislation. I do worry about that.
All these types of subjects. You asked a question about what's this macro stuff. These are the macro things that we're constantly looking at. And what it becomes our job to do then, again, going back to that buffer analogy, is to be able to figure out what all this means, what all this looks like, what we can use, what we can't, and filter it so we can communicate on a very intelligible level with our clients, who are sophisticated in general, but some of this stuff is just boring to them. So that's one of the aspects. But the other thought there is that we're trying to find a way to make sure that our clients are protected from these things. That's our job. We're not here to sell them something. As Dick said, we don't sell any products. We don't have a particular instrument that we get compensated for or anything like that. That's completely irrelevant. So what we're really boil it down to is just to help protect what they have, help them make good decisions, help them understand the alternatives, and help them, like we do with our own research, figure out what all the noise is so they can move on with their lives and they don't have to get bogged down with the headlines.
Okay, let's
Well
do this.
said, John.
Yeah, very, very nicely said.